Well, ladies and gentlemen, 2 live streams in a day. How amazing is this? Taylor, you slept through the first one. It's what happens when we don't actually put you on the invite. Isn't that weird?
It's weird. I just didn't show up because it wasn't on my calendar.
I know. It's the way it works. Hey, folks, we're so glad to be back. And if you were part of our conversation this morning that I had with Eric Johnson from AWS, there was a lot of data conversation that happened in there. And we wanted to come back because we need to have a deeper conversation about data. But here's something I need to know. Who's watching in the middle of the day? Are you watching over lunch? Where are you? Comment down below. Tell us what's going on. We have a guy coming in here shortly. He works for Rackspace. You may be surprised to learn. And we've got a new offering coming out. We thought, let's hop on and let's talk about that for a little bit. But Taylor, you started your work career in tech. Doing all kinds of .NET Microsofty stuff, traditional applications. You spent a bunch of time working over in the serverless world, in the cloud world. Very much committed into the AWS footprint. What's one of the big challenges when you think about moving on-premises stuff out to the cloud? I mean, and I'll feed you. It's data. How do you get the gobs of data moved?
Yeah, I was about to say that's a very broad question, Jeff, if you let me, but I knew you were going to bring me back to data. I think, and not to obviously tee up today's topic too much, but I do think data becomes, I want to use the word problem, probably not the best one. It's a challenge that's there, like security, like compute, like anything else. Right. But the reality of everything is just like every problem is an application problem. Well, every app problem is a data problem for the most part. Whether it's data you're storing or data you're passing or data you're floating, obviously data is going to be a big challenge. But unlike applications and some workflows and other examples, we say this phrase a lot. I know Michael's going to come on and hate me for saying it, but data has data's heavy, data's hard, data has gravity. All these phrases we use to basically describe the fact that data, once it becomes collected and it's so important, you have to sort of respect what it is, how big it is, how difficult it is to move. And so I think data becomes an issue because it's not as easy as some of our cloud provider friends and technologists, even like myself, would purport to say it is. And data becomes one of those challenges. The reality is a lot of technology over the last 15 years has really been held back by the speed of the network lines in between the places we want to do our tech things. And I think data is definitely sort of at that point where you're starting to really feel that crutch, that our creativity is limitless. And from an application, compute, AI, ML perspective, we can do whatever we want. But how do we move things around and sling them around? How do we use the right tool for the job when we've got to move all the supplies between work sites every single time? And so I think that those sort of challenges of how do you move data around without actually destroying your budget, things like that, become a major concern.
Well, and we've been thinking about these applications that we move out to the cloud as these collective units, and we have these conversations around, do we lift and shift, move and improve, transform? But it's always in the context of let's pick it all up. Let's get the app layer, the presentation layer, the business logic layer, the data tier, and move all of that stuff cohesively to a different location. In fact, I gave some news this morning that I read about. AWS has an interesting new service. They team up with NetApp so that natively in there they can utilize the new file system that exists out in AWS and connect it so that it becomes easy to kind of snap mirror, speaking in NetApp terms, out into AWS. But our topic today, anybody who has looked at the title, is data freedom. Now that sounds inspirational. It sounds confusing. It sounds like a lot of different things. But I think it's time that we get Michael Levy in here, a racker, one of our friends, to come in and talk about what the heck is data freedom and why does data need to be free. Michael, welcome to the program. Glad you're here.
Thank you, Jeff. Appreciate it. And thanks for the opportunity to discuss this new offering. Everyone should look out for a press release in the coming days for this. So I came up with the name Data Freedom, and I'm in New York, so I say data, not data, so you'll have to deal with that. I came up with the name in the shower because this practice of disaggregating storage from the public cloud compute has a lot of these political terms, data independence, data repatriation. And what it comes down to is the fact that the public cloud providers, the hyperscale public cloud providers like AWS, Google Cloud, Azure, they don't charge you to bring your data in, but they charge you a per gig fee to bring it out.
Right.
Now, if you Google cloud egress fees, you're going to see a lot of angry commentary as recent as a few days ago of different customers and users and competitors and partners talking about these fees as predatory, right? You know, they want your data, which is that data gravity that Taylor spoke about. And, you know, some may think of your data being held hostage. Now, as someone who, you know, runs a colo business within Rackspace and has been in the connectivity world for over a decade, it costs a lot of money to transport data out. And people who are pulling their data out of the cloud, they're bringing it everywhere. So I don't blame the 500-pound gorillas for charging for it coming out. And they actually give you a pathway to greatly reduce these fees by riding a private network. So for instance, Google, they charge you 12 cents starting a gig to bring data out from Google Cloud somewhere else. And if you ride a private network, you only pay 1 cent. For Google, it goes from 9 cents to 2 cents. So what I'm launching with Data Freedom is storage disaggregated from public cloud compute managed by Rackspace in a neutral cloud adjacent facility. So we're talking, these are walking distance to the cloud on-ramps and fiber travels the speed of light. That is directly connected to every cloud of the customer's choice. So only the data that needs to go to the public cloud goes there. And when it inevitably bounces to another cloud or comes back home to the environment we're operating, it enjoys the unlocked lower tier fees. So I see this not only as cost savings, but it removes inhibitors to realizing a multi-cloud vision. We talk about these sexy multi-cloud strategies all the time as pundits in the industry, but there's this lurking cost that has actually gotten CIOs fired. Now, I'm not going to mention any company names, but I know for a fact that CFOs have fired CFOs for receiving an enormous egress bill that they didn't see coming. So Data Freedom is giving you that freedom from data transit fees coming from the hyperscale public cloud, so you can use the public cloud to its highest potential and use all the native tool sets. So let's say like you are all in AWS, but you want to use the AI ML tool set in Google. You will no longer have that concern that you're going to be dinged with these fees every time a gig bounces from Google to AWS, or from AWS to Google, because you're riding Rackspace's private backbone.
So a ton to unpack inside of there, but let's for my sake, let's dumb it down for me.
Yeah, no problem.
So that someone wants to use in public cloud that is so near and dear to that public cloud. Hey, everybody, I'm going to just pause for a second and say, so glad that you guys are commenting. Pravan, glad to see you again. So guys, make sure that you're commenting down there. Let us know where you're coming in from. And if you have any questions about this whole topic of data or data, I'm in Texas, so we just call them cows. Freedom. So with that, what we're talking about is taking all the intelligence and putting it in cloud of choice, and the data and putting that in a Rackspace data center in all around the world. You mentioned earlier, any major metropolitan, people have access to actually put that there. And what that does, and let's take one of those elements you talked about. Let's take cost off the table for a second. Let's put functionality on the table. And the functionality I want to talk about is multi-cloud. So if we've got an application that really could use some amazing analytics that we might see coming out of Google, but we want to use some compute engine that's coming out of AWS, we now have the ability to take and create an application that truly utilizes multiple clouds to as a delivery zone. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, that's exactly what I'm saying. Ultimately, we want IT decision makers to be able to put each application in the infrastructure environment that suits it best. And we want them to be able to use these native cloud tool sets. Now, I'm not a public cloud expert like Taylor, and he could probably talk more about what these tool sets are. But coming from the power, space, and cooling world looking up, I think originally the hyperscale providers, weren't as differentiated, but today they're really differentiating. And they're coming out with these native features and capabilities. And there's a lot of business value that companies can generate using all of them, and they want to use all of them. and they don't want to have runaway costs. So I know AI/ML comes to mind. Having worked primarily in the colo world, now I run Rackspace's storage product in addition to our colo offering, but I started my career as an analyst with 451 Research covering the colo space, and I've worked at colo companies in between. Every colo customer, when they want to lift and shift their gear and bring it to the cloud, because that's far less expensive than bringing the cloud to them and calling up the telephone company and connecting to each one, they ask, how can you connect me to the cloud? Because they all want to remove this pain point, which I see these costs as the second largest pain point after ransomware attacks, which everyone's obviously concerned about. So this has been top of mind, for years, and I think that we have something unique that can solve for these. So there's freedom to be able to access, every compute and native tool set that a company desires and will drive value for them.
Well, Taylor, let's go over to you for a second. Somebody who has moved more than one application out to the public cloud. Data. We say data has gravity a lot, and that usually has a term that speaks to, gravity has value. It's big. It pulls us together. It's also the thing that keeps me from flying, and that gets on my nerves. But let's talk about that as one of those things that keeps applications from being able to transform and see the value in the public cloud.
Yeah, I'm sure we're going to fail to describe it the best way. One of our data experts definitely could, but I think the gravity aspect, we were discussing this before we got on, of data. I keep wanting to say data now, Michael. You got me all messed up. But lifelong saying data. Now I'm questioning everything. The reality is, unlike a lot of other things you do in technology, especially in applications and any sort of customer delivered service, be it internal or external, I think data is one of those things that you have to support the property of the data more than you can define that. And I think that's the gravity aspect. To me, gravity of data is really just a reality. The fact that if you're collecting data, you're holding data, where that data ends up sitting in a lot of use cases, not all, but in a lot, that's an unchangeable variable for you, right? Let's take the example of having to be in private cloud. You may have a valid reason that things have to stay in your data center, or a colo data center that is not considered public cloud, because even though we all kind of know they're all just servers and wires between them, there's a lot of compliance distinction that really differentiates that. So that data may have to exist somewhere for security compliance reasons. There might be latency concerns. It may simply be the nature of, hey, we've collected data in one spot for 10 years. We can't change all that overnight. And so that's how I look at gravity. It's sort of this unchangeable property of a lot of data stores that we have to work around. And I think that it has been limiting cloud solutions, kind of like Michael alluded to. We always talk about one of the best advantages of multi-cloud or hybrid or whatever word you want to choose is you can use the right tool for the job. So even, you can either use every cloud provider completely equally, or maybe you're more of a primary, secondary, but almost every customer is going to have a reason to want to use a service somewhere that they aren't. And I think that is, my phone is ringing, it's vibrating my camera. I was like, what's happening here?
I was wondering too. You're in California. Yeah. I thought it could be an earthquake. I was worried about you.
Be an earthquake, but I think that's the important thing is idea of keeping the data where it is and finding and not saying that sentence as a negative, I think is going to open up a lot of doors for a lot of customers. The ability to say, hey, I do want to use, maybe I'm an AWS primary customer, but I want to use a service that Google is offering or something in the Azure ecosystem. Maybe I have a customer that uses Power BI, and so I need to do that sort of workflow. The idea of keeping my data in one place and then sort of shipping it off or allowing those clouds to reach in, I think that's going to offer a ton of solutions, because I'm not going to say up until today, Michael's the product and they can make statements like that, but these sort of solutions are increasing what you can do with a hybrid cloud solution, the different sort of ways, because otherwise you've got to move that data around, which is very difficult, or you've got to ship copies of it. And egress charges, to Michael's point, are some of the most, I won't say hidden charges, they're the most surprising charges for customers. And even for customers who completely understand them, they're a real thing that you have to deal with. And I think they limit decisions. So when I think about gravity, the question you gave, I think it's just respecting the fact that in a lot of places, regardless of the reason, data needs to stay where it exists today, form, fashion, location. And so solutions like this are allowing you to accept that reality, but also leverage other cloud tools. So we're removing those barriers to modernization, right? It's not, hey, my data has to stay here and therefore I can't do anything anywhere else. That's what a lot of customers are dealing with. Solutions like this are opening those doors. I can use AI ML solutions. I can use multiple clouds. I can do really hybrid event-driven architectures, even if my data has to stay in one place. So I think that's a really interesting and value add.
Yeah, because that's a reality for things today. But to Taylor, you just mentioned a word that I think a lot of people are probably wondered about right now, and that is latency. So if we're going to pull all this data and stick it in a data center somewhere, but yet all the stuff exists out in the cloud, Michael, how do we solve for latency in your solution?
Sure. So before I use the term, if any of my close friends have time during the day and are listening to this, they know that there are a few words that seem positive, but I have letters ready to go to Merriam-Webster's to say that they should be marked as pejorative. And I know that data gravity is not in the dictionary, but that's to me a completely pejorative term, right? It makes it more difficult to use the best application for the task at hand. So data gravity not only exists that data is being pulled toward the public clouds, but also physically you have these concentrations of physical data center capacity, where the who's who of data center tenants in these communities pulled together, like Ashburn, Virginia is the center of the internet in the United States. So if you go on a website, there's a huge percentage that you're passing through this ecosystem where the internet started. And in London, it's the Docklands, for instance, in that market. So as a service provider that's been around for some time, we have large-scale data center presences in all of these hotbeds. So as I mentioned, our facilities are walking distance to where all the cloud on-ramps are, and we have private connections, robust connections between us and all the cloud providers, and also the cloud ecosystem providers like Megaport, the Equinix Cloud Exchange Fabric, and Unitas Global. And what we do is we actually weave together all that. I don't want to get too technical, but with layer 3 BGP sessions, we weave together all these endpoints spun off of those 3 ecosystem providers and direct cloud connections. So it becomes one big, happy, private virtual environment that never touches the public internet. So I don't want to say a VPN because people would assume that it's on the public internet, but it never touches the public internet. It rides our private pipes. So that helps you achieve all those compliance requirements that you mentioned before. But also we're talking speed of light, traveling over 1 or 2 hops, they call them, between our backbone and the cloud providers, traversing a distance that I can walk within 5 minutes. So that's how we get that sub 5 millisecond latency that is kind of the standard everyone's looking for. And you really only need that if you're streaming video games. But we do achieve that in nearly all scenarios. And it would take an enterprise years to develop this presence in Hong Kong and Dallas and Singapore and London
Sydney
and Frankfurt.
and all the places.
Yeah, exactly.
Right. And so you make a really good point. So because these are private networks, so it goes back to one of the things you said early on in our conversation, and that is there are 2 tiers of pricing for coming out of the hyperscale clouds. There is what goes out through the public side, and there is what goes out through the private side. And because this solution rides on our private connections, that's how we keep the price down.
That's correct. We have been enjoying this discount, and basically we've offered this for some time, but now we're bundling together the storage that's disaggregated or attached, so our customers can enjoy the same discount as well. And not trying to tout everything we can do, but this opens up customers, if they choose to consume all those public cloud services that we have and data services without worrying about being hit with these egress fees.
Well, and it's a huge point. While this is a new aggregation of an offering, it isn't a new service wherever this transport that everything rides on. The rack built on what we call Rack Connect Global, which is in its 3rd or 4th iteration and many, many years of development.
Mm-hmm. That's correct. Yeah, I ushered in kind of the third iteration of it, and it's allowing us. Well, we also added through Unitas Global, which is a great partner, we've added last mile connectivity. So we can tie together all the cloud connections and then also get back to the customer's prem. But one thing that I want to mention about the tech that's really exciting with these layer 3 BGP sessions, that our very well staffed network operations team that's managing these connections, they tie it all together. So, yes, you have connectivity, any transfer going between the Rackspace managed storage and say AWS, that will ride the private network and enjoy those fees. But then if anything is bouncing between the clouds as well, it rides our private backbone, never touches the congested and secure public internet. And they also see, so they call that the lateral traffic. And also in terms of security, digital adversaries, hackers, they tend to go after the lateral traffic between clouds. So we're also protecting that inner cloud traffic and ensuring that you're not hit up with egress fees every time a gig bounces between each cloud.
Yep. Well, go ahead, Taylor. Looks like you got something there.
Well, no, I mean, I was just going to reiterate. I think that's the key. If I zoom out a little bit for anyone listening, I think that's one of the key advantages we're trying to offer here is to take capabilities that we've had and we've been experts at, in addition to string together these solutions that, I'm not the product guy, so Michael might reach across the screen. I think the reality of a lot of these solutions is there are definitely companies that could build this themselves. They can colo, they can buy the networking gear, they can run a wire to a meet me room in a colo. They can do this themselves, but that's a lot. That's a lot of work. If the only reason you have a point of presence somewhere is to do things like that, and I've seen customers, I have installed routers whose whole purpose for a company is to route Azure traffic back to AWS and avoid it. Like the whole, I bought a network cage to put one router stack in there to do that. So I think that's the key advantage to something like this is now you can actually access the sort of application architectures that could benefit from low latency sort of, central network plus storage combined, but you can do so without building your own storage infrastructure. So I think that's the key infrastructure. This is a very much, I think almost falls into that edge type of world. We think of edge as a compute solution. This starts to bleed into the storage. But to me, that's really exciting because that is the thing that prevents customers. One, I've got to deal with all these concerns. And then two, even if the solution is there, I may not be able to build it, or that may not be the most financially viable for me to build this whole infrastructure. I think that's what we're bringing to the table with our partnerships and our experience and our facilities here, where, hey, as just an application product owner, I can use this service to think about those sort of application designs. I don't have to worry with the fact that I can't, it doesn't make sense for me to build the infrastructure. I can leverage Rackspace Data Freedom to do it. So that's exciting for me as an architect who's built apps like that. So that's the positive side. The tee up I wanted to do for Michael a little bit. Oh yeah, go for it. And then I had a question for you.
I was just gonna say, I don't want to fail to mention, we're offering file and object storage that's massively scalable attached to this. We're focusing on the connectivity a lot, but we're offering different flavors. That was my yeah. Oh, okay. Yeah.
Go for it.
Sorry. So what was the question?
Well, I was just going to ask that. As the architect in my head, so now we've got I've solved the technical, can I do it? And then I've solved, hey, I can let, I don't have to also make a business case to build this infrastructure for one project or product. I can use this. So then I start to think about all those application architectures, either pushing data up in sort of batches or pulling it down. But yeah, my next question is, so what sort of, we say storage, but storage can mean a lot of things to a lot of people. So I'd love to understand just a little bit more about what sort of storage options can I do with this service? Is this just hard drives, or am I doing other sort of access? So I was hoping you could, give us a little bit more detail on that.
Sure thing. So today, and I expect to expand on this platform on Rackspace Data Freedom and introduce other capabilities. So right now, we are offering file and object dedicated storage deployments. We are working with Dell EMC and NetApp, and we have the highest level alliances with these partners. So they've worked very closely with us in this rollout, and we help shape each other's solutions. So that's very exciting. We can scale from 100 terabytes to multiple petabytes. And we have customers who use this and are actively looking for deployments, across the gamut. Having spoken to various market research analysts, and even though I was one myself, I still trust them a bit, even though I know how the sausage is made. And what they've told me is that In the next year, customers are looking to disaggregate or repatriate primarily file storage from the public cloud, and then it's going to move primarily to object in 18 months to 3 years. So that's what we're delivering now, and it's fully managed by Rackspace. We also offer an unmanaged variant for customers. Coming from the colo world, there are customers that are apprehensive of relinquishing control. So we offer also the hardware only, where they don't want us to manage it. But everything for customers who are coming from the public cloud, they don't want to have to hire hard-to-come-by storage talent. So this is fully managed and unmanaged, whatever the customers want.
Pretty amazing stuff, and I think definitely scratches an itch as we think about how storage and all of the services that are available, not just from the primary cloud providers, but even some of the niche capabilities that exist out there. I think this becomes extraordinarily compelling. Now, there is a question we haven't really chatted much with our good friends in the audience. There's a question that I think ties to this that I think maybe we'll dip into super quickly, and that is, in your opinion, what comes first, disaster recovery or business continuity? And isn't business continuity the plan, and disaster recovery is part of one of the elements of it? But either of you gents want to jump into the DR business continuity conversation?
Sure, I can wade into that. So I think it's which comes first. As I tend to do, I'm going to annoyingly answer and say I think that's a it depends question. But I think I don't want to say two faces of the same coin, but they're very related. But I think you've got to think about, try not to get pedantic about wording here. Your business continuity plan needs to think about all that in a very practical manner. And that's where I line up. So the reason I'm saying that way is I have a lot of customers that are like, I focus so much on, okay, I build my thing, and then what is my immediate failover scenario, my disaster recovery scenario, what is my RTO, RPO? I mean, we're all trained to think like that. And I think it's very important. What we forget, though, is there's subjective nature to the business. And with cloud and hybrid architecture and all this stuff, there's a lot of nuance in those questions. And so I think you've got to really think about, like I encourage, people like, should I use containers or serverless? And I give answers like, well, hold on, what are we trying to solve? I think the same is true here. So you've got to really think about what is the impact of your business, to your customers, to your PR, given a catastrophic event, right? And I think it's very different for some customers, right? And so take an e-commerce site, for example. If an e-commerce website goes down, then that's obviously, you've killed your revenue stream. You've probably hurt your public relations. You've lost customer credibility, maybe not the first time, but after it happens a couple of times, et cetera. That's really bad. But I've seen e-commerce companies develop cloud architectures that actually are saying, hey, hold on a second. The website has to stay up. The customer needs to still be able to give me orders. But maybe everything beyond that point, if that fails, I've got some time, right? Maybe if my order to production time is 2 weeks, if I get that order 12 hours later, it doesn't really matter. And so I think that really feeds into when you ask questions, what's more important? I think you've got to break it down like that. So things like, hey, my website, my revenue stream, well, maybe in that scenario, that's critical. That's got to stay up. You need to focus on that. But if can you afford a 12, 24-hour delay in getting that order to your production site? Well, in some businesses, I think you probably can. I worked for a logistics software company many moons ago, and we had this exact debate. And that's what we ultimately, as long as we could get the orders and reliably transact and do that, we could make up for our production errors, right? And so I think that's just one example where you've got to focus. And so I think that's where you've got to think about business continuity plans. DR is critically important to so many businesses, but you do need to think about what you're doing and what each piece of the solution is doing, because a cloud architecture that's well done, they have 30 components. Yeah. Do all 30 of those need to have the same requirements? I don't think they do. And I think that's, when you start designing for cloud, you also need to start designing for those sort of scenarios. You have a lot of flexibility in all sort of BC concerns, be it DR, be it high availability, be it failover, be it all the things. You've got a lot of knobs to turn there. So that's how I would approach it. I wouldn't say, hey, one is more important than the other at a broad example. It's let's look at the individual components of an application architecture and really think about, and again, if you get lost, always go back. What do my customers need? What does my business need? That's the only reason we're doing any of this. And then we can sort of step through that. And I think that'll drive you towards, hey, these things are, you hear tiering. Tier 1, I've got to keep these things up. Tier 2, I can afford an outage. Tier 3, it can go down for a while. I think you got to think of it like that and prioritize that way. versus sort of prioritizing the topic first?
Again, like you said, it kind of goes back to the fact that not one size fits all in all scenarios. And when we think about data, data tier of all of this stuff and data, I think that becomes one of the areas that maybe in some scenarios really could be one of those things that spans a lot of it. As you think about minimizing costs, as you think about security, as you think about really just owning the gravity that you've got. I know you want to that we want to use that term sometimes positively or negatively, but Michael, I really do appreciate you being here today. I want to give you one quick last shot before we cut it loose. Now, people can go and get more information just by heading over to Rackspace.com. Look for the little chat. Just jump in and talk to one of our humans. Our humans would love to tell you about data freedom. You'll do that through the chat there. But any parting thoughts there, Michael, before we close it down for today?
I think that what we've put together here, we packaged a way for our customers to realize their cloud dreams. I even think with that last question that we just addressed, you can do really interesting things to mitigate ransomware attacks. You can create air-gapped infrastructure that you can, either way to the public cloud or repatriate, make sure that it's separate in the event of an attack for disaster recovery. So there are a lot of things you can do to make sure that you are protected when it comes to production or disaster recovery. We are opening up our infrastructure that took us several years to kind of organically just amass. And we really are excited to see what creative strategies customers implement leveraging what we're offering here. So very excited for the launch. Look out for the press release in the coming days. And yeah, really happy that I had an opportunity to discuss this with you guys. Thank you.
Absolutely. Thanks so much. And everyone, thanks for taking the time to be with us here today. Data freedom, it's huge and it's incredibly important to pay attention to. And if you want to learn more about it, head over to Rackspace.com. And the chat box will show up and just tell them that Michael sent. I want to talk about data freedom. All right, everyone. Have a great day.